Thank you so much, Ati, joining you from the floor of the DA Congress. The two issues we'll discuss here, we'll take a look at the Democratic Alliance's policy towards coalitions, but then we'll directly address an interesting development coming off the floor regarding another failed attempt for the DA to create the position of deputy leader, a deputy for John Steenhuisen. Let's begin with the policy discussion. We're joined by Matthew Cuthbert. He's the head of policy resolutions at this Congress. Thank you so much for your time, Matthew. Can you confirm that there was a draft policy proposal for the DA to take a position that it won't work with the ANC in coalitions?
Yes, there was in fact, and procedurally it was not signed because the seconder fell away and it didn't fall within our regulations and therefore it had to be withdrawn.
Do you know why the seconder fell away?
I'm not sure. He just decided and informed the committee as such, and then we were able to remove it from our speakers list that we have today.
All right, so a discussion on whether the DA should take a firm position on whether it'll work with the ANC will not happen at this Congress, is that right?
Well, there's one coalition motion that is coming through tomorrow that will be discussed, and that is related to reaffirming the DA's values and principles in negotiating coalitions. And I think we've been quite clear, particularly our leader, in saying that our goal in the run-up to the 2024 election is to make sure that we get as many blue votes in the bank so that we have the best possible negotiating position post the election, where we'll have the high-stakes poker game to decide who governs the country moving forward.
Sure. When it comes to the nuts and bolts of how the DA will approach its coalitions, what are the intentions that are being voiced in the policy resolutions?
So in the resolution, it's sticking to our values and our principles, and that obviously implies that we will not govern for the sake of governing, but we must be able to be in coalition partners that share some fundamental values with us, because we found in the past when you get into bed with people such as the EFF, then that becomes difficult to govern when you don't share the same policies and values. And therefore, service delivery is impacted as a result, and that's why I think delegates have decided to bring that particular resolution to the House.
Thank you so much. Matthew Cuthbert, he's the head of policy resolutions for the DA. Interesting that they won't be discussing whether or not they'll work with the ANC in the coalition, more along values and principles. We spoke to John Steenhuisen about that earlier. But let's turn to this discussion. Another attempt to create a deputy position for John Steenhuisen has failed here, if we understand the rejection of the chapter of the Constitution correctly. Natasha Mazone is joining us to talk about this. Natasha, did I understand it correctly that the rejection of that chapter in the constitutional amendments means that the creation of the deputy position has once again failed at the conference?
Well, what it means is that that entire section and every resolution that was in that section has failed now to be implemented in the Constitution going forward. So that particular chapter of the Constitution remains exactly as it is and as it stands at the moment.
That means there won't be a deputy for John Steenhuisen.
No.
Natasha, did I see you voting in favor of creating that position?
You know, I'm a firm believer in a greater circle. I believe in making the circle bigger of people that give advice. And I think especially going into a national government election, I personally didn't see a problem with having a deputy leader position. I've never seen a problem with having it. I think that the leader remains in control of the party and does a great job, I may add, just happened to say so as an aside. But I also do think that there are times when the leader isn't available and that a deputy leader can then step in. Obviously, you have to have a very good synergy between the leader and the deputy leader, which they would create in a FedEx meeting, and Federal Council would ensure that that would happen. So, you know, we don't have it. We haven't had it before, so it's no loss, no gain. As the Constitutional Committee found, they were neutral on the issue, and it turns out so was Congress.
You're lastly vying for deputy chairperson. What do you think of how your campaign's gone so far? Are you feeling as confident as John Steenhuisen is feeling about the race?
Look, John Steenhuisen has run the most amazing campaign and is the most amazing leader that I've ever served under, and I've served under 4 leaders. So I am completely behind John. With a deputy chairperson, there's 3 deputy chair people that will be elected. I'm standing together with 8 amazing candidates, and I've actually realized today, win or lose, it's a win for the DA. No one person is greater than the party. So I sincerely hope that I do become one of the three, but if I don't, I'm also very confident in knowing that we have very, very good candidates who are standing for the positions.
Thank you, Natasha. Appreciate that. Natasha Mazone vying for the Deputy Federal Chairperson position. Let's bring in Professor Dirk Coetzee just to talk about what we've seen here. This is interesting on a number of levels, Professor Coetzee, because firstly, we have this attempt to create the deputy position failing again. It was introduced at the last Congress by Mbali and Tuli. This time it seemed like a much closer vote. They didn't announce the outcome of the vote, and there was a lot more energy around it as well. What did you make of it?
Yes, it was highly interesting, and I think what we are seeing is that I guess there's a notion that the leadership must be expanded. You know? It has been done in the past at the level of the deputy chairpersons, and we've seen it with the deputy chairperson for the Federal Council as well as for the deputy federal chairperson. So in a sense there's one absent position, and that's a deputy for the leader. I don't know, it wasn't discussed here, but I guess there's some uncertainty of what will be the role of the deputy leader. Because there is this triumvirate leadership. There is the federal leader, there's the federal chairperson, Ivan Meyer, and there's the chairperson of the Federal Council, Helen Zille. And I think they possibly will see this as competition for them. But then at the same time, it is seen as opportunities for others in order to broaden, especially the position of the federal leader. The fact that the election for the federal leader hasn't happened yet maybe also influenced it, because that there's someone who wants to say he must stand on his own. Let's say, for argument's sake, it was after the election. There could have been much more of a sentiment to say the one who lost can be created the opportunity to be the deputy president. So these are all the arguments, I think, that might have gone through the minds of the delegates here.
Also, if they create a deputy leader for John Steenhuisen, it might be grooming a next leader for the DA. And John Steenhuisen already telling Newzroom Afrika that if the DA loses support in the next election, he'll resign and step away. Do you think that this position or the fight to create it will come back again?
I think it will. What we've seen here today was a real split amongst the delegates. You know, there was differences of opinion. There was a strong support for the idea of a deputy leader by implication. So it's not something which is going to die down. And I think at the next conference in Congress in 3 years' time, it might be a much more viable proposition.
Thank you so much, Professor Dirk Coetzee, speaking to us at the DA Congress. Also, interesting development was Dr. Ivan Meyer, the federal chairperson, getting up in the middle of that vote, telling delegates that they need to be disciplined. And that was in response to delegates starting to sing in support of their motion to create that deputy position. And he also told delegates that they shouldn't comment on others voting differently, saying that they wouldn't allow ill discipline within the DA. Clearly, he was referring to people getting up and singing, constituting ill discipline. That's pretty much the most interesting development of this morning coming from the floor with regards to the constitutional amendments, and it's probably something that will be a recurring theme at the DA Congress. For now, the attention shifts to that election of the DA federal leader, which is of course between John Steenhuisen and Dr. Mpho-Palatse, and then they'll have an interesting policy discussion, particularly around coalitions. We'll take a break, but we'll bring you all the latest insights from the Democratic Alliance's Congress of 2023 here in Midrand. They'll be electing new leadership, charting their way towards the 2024 elections, compiling a strategy that they'll use. Stay tuned to Newzroom Afrika as we bring you views from within the DA, some insights from political analysts, and of course the latest bits of drama that are happening here at the Democratic Alliance. Stay tuned and we'll be back after this.